Hello and welcome. This is the 5th episode of the State of Things with C.K. Slater. I'm very glad to tell you that this week I am joined by Matt Killen. Now, Matt, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Matt Killen. I'm a precinct committee person. I work in the local Democratic Party. I mainly deal with press relations and things like that.
How long have you been involved with the Democratic Party here in Jacksonville?
Gosh, I started as an independent, and I was just helping out with the Obama campaign in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, I met some people that were interested in helping me, work harder on the campaigns and things like that. So
kind of increase your involvement.
Yeah, definitely. It was it was a slow process, but.
Well, I would imagine there were a lot of people interested, especially in, his two go-arounds running for president, very interested being involved. And so there's a lot of work, or a lot of people splitting up only so much work. So there's only, so much room for people to get involved.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll see that with really popular politicians sometimes, where everyone and their cat, wants to hop on.
It's the same with anything. It's if it's something interesting and people want to do it, it's harder to break in. But yeah.
Did you find that same kind of circumstance with your involvement with Bernie's operation this last go around?
No, actually,
because there was the split between.
However, yeah, with the traditional local politicians that were going to go for Hillary,
mm-hmm.
They had almost zero interest in Bernie, so. They weren't in the way, so that's how it was easy to start.
It was more of a grassroots thing.
Yeah, it was. I wouldn't say that it was more of a grassroots thing, because whenever they started with Hillary, they were grassroots, and
mm-hmm.
in the past and things like that. So I can.
But I mean, just the kind of people that campaign was connected with. It didn't maybe have the same kind of access to establishment cash or some of the DNC infrastructure that Hillary is obviously going to have contact with.
Yeah, but to be completely frank, in Jacksonville, the DNC infrastructure is not, a big deal.
This isn't, we're not Chicago or.
No, we're definitely not Chicago.
Yeah.
Chicago is like that's. It gets kind of crazy up there.
Yeah, that's like the crown jewel of Democratic counties.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, tell us a little bit about your work background. Now, you're not from Jacksonville, are you?
No, I'm not. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. Small town outside Fort Worth, Weatherford.
Okay.
Which is the quarter horse capital of the world.
Which is a very interesting thing to be known for.
Yeah, that and peaches. So we had the peach festival. That was we just had the jazz festival here.
Yeah.
Same concept.
Now, did you spend your whole childhood in Texas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Up until I was 20.
And then, I guess, the Navy?
Yep. Became a undesignated seaman in the Navy. And so they tell you that you're going to go and kind of feel out all the different careers and stuff like that, but you're a boatswain's mate.
Yeah, it's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah. And so I struck into boatswain's mate, made third class, and then by that time you're ready to get out. And so, continue your career or get out.
Mm-hmm.
In the first 4 years, you really make that decision. And I was interested in going to school, learning how to make a difference and how to be to the max of my potential that I could be, that kind of thing.
And that desire took you to Jacksonville, ultimately.
Well, it kept me in Jacksonville.
Okay.
So in the Navy, I was stationed here at Mayport on the Halliburton, and I went to FSCJ as I was getting out, and from there I really got interested in different perspectives and things like that. In the Navy, I was able to actually go to a lot of different countries, but when you're in the Navy, you're there for 3 days. You don't really study them,
and you're seeing it with all your Navy buddies,
and
thinking Navy things.
Yeah, and so you're not really into the culture, but you did see things. You saw how they've lived. You saw that kind of stuff, and it was
you're exposed to it.
Yeah, and it was very interesting to see like how some of these people were getting along in their day-to-day lives and things like that.
Was that a really interesting thing for you to get exposure to maybe parts of the world you hadn't seen before through the Navy?
I mean, I think that would be interesting to anyone.
Yeah. But could you just maybe tell me a little bit more about that experience? Maybe a couple of the places that you went that stand out to you?
Yeah, definitely. We went to Scotland. That was really awesome. I had some of the like really old scotch.
Yeah.
With this crazy guy who's like, he came right up to us because you can tell whenever Americans are there. Yeah, and because they're all clean cut, their sideburns are all at the same place, and so he comes up to me and he's like, "Here, my friend, you got to try this scotch," and like pretty much pours it down my throat, and it was awful. But it was a really good time. It was very interesting.
The fun kind of awful.
Yeah, definitely. And then my favorite place that we went was probably Peru.
Okay.
Yeah, we were in Lima, and then we went to Ecuador.
You didn't get altitude sickness, did you? Because I know, is it Peru? Really?
Actually, I only got that once, and that was in Colorado.
Okay.
But, yeah, we drove from Colorado to LA, so it was just like you're going all the way down.
Yeah. That's like this whole slope of the continent right there almost.
Yeah, that was bad. But no, we got to go to the Andes Mountains and check that out. Went snowboarding. It was actually really crazy because the ride up is a very thin road that goes around the mountain, and they've got buses full of people passing each other on these teeny tiny roads.
And with no like guardrail or anything.
What's a guardrail? Like they have there's no permits there.
Would there be like a cross every so often where someone had like fallen off? Like did you?
No, because the cross would fall off. Like it's like no, there's no way.
The other people on the bus would just be like, "Oh yeah, that's where Jim died. That's where Bill died."
Yeah. Don't look over there. There's still blood.
Yeah.
So then we went snowboarding, and I'd never been, so it was really interesting. I thought it was the best ever. Like, there's no other mountains in the world compared to this.
I mean, getting to snowboard for the first time in the Andes is pretty amazing.
But it wasn't. Like, in my perspective, that was as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an epiphany, because you go to Colorado, and it's like fluffy, like perfect snow. And so that's, the difference. But it's just all about perspective, so.
Now, you were telling me earlier when we spoke this week that it was during your Navy career that you began to think a little bit more seriously about politics, and maybe that led into some of the interest you pursued when you got out of the Navy.
Well, I just wasn't very serious whenever I got into the Navy. I think what I told my recruiter was, like, I want to get out of this town. All we have is a Walmart. And he laughed at me, and he was like, "Oh, you don't realize the serious decision that you're making." He's like, "I'm gonna get some more chest candy for getting you, so I'll throw you right in."
Yeah.
And and it was about halfway through my Navy career whenever I was on watch. We were out actually in Cartagena, Colombia.
Oh.
But before that, that's where the incident actually.
Which is a much nicer place than it used to be in the 80s, I hear.
I don't know. Yeah, it's got its problems.
But it's still a little bit.
I remember walking down the street, and there was like no cones, just a hole that went down like 15 feet, and it wasn't even lit. Like
no safety rails there either.
Nothing. Like no, there's no rules. So it's like outside of this
don't
brick
lose your
wall.
Children.
They told us not to go outside this wall. I did, but they're like, stay inside the wall, but we traveled outward, and that's where 15-foot holes are in the place, so you gotta not go there. Anyway, back to what you were saying. I got more involved in the decision makers than before. Before, I didn't take things seriously. I was just kind of going through life, and our leadership wasn't allowing us to get proper sleep. So we were in you guys at home can do this math and tell me what you think, but we were in 3 5-hour sections. So every 15 hours, you were standing a 5-hour watch at a different time in the day. And then on top of that, regardless, 8 to 4, you had to work. So if you were on watch, then you go to watch. But if you're not on watch, then you go to work. So
can your watch fall during your work hours and it be like concurrent? Or?
Yeah. You don't have to like go then.
It doesn't have to be like you work and then you watch.
Yeah, no. So you can Yeah, say you go and watch at 8,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get off at, 12 or whatever. So you're not going to have to like make up those hours and work or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, no. So if you're off watch or off work at 4, then you're off work. You're good to go.
Yeah.
But then you'll be on watch at 10. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And be on till 2 in the morning or something like that. And so you're not getting proper sleep.
And you're not able to build a schedule of,
No,
I can always know I can sleep. There's
not a neurologist or a sleep doctor in the world that would tell you that is a good thing for anyone. Like, doesn't matter. You're serving your country or not, you should be able to get proper sleep if it's possible. You know, if you're in the middle of it. If you're in a rabbit hole or something like that, I can understand that foxhole.
And you had told me that eventually you took some of these concerns to your higher ups.
Yeah, I did, and they completely ignored it. They told me to basically stop being a wuss and get over it. And I was like, well, I'm not feeling very well, so I just thought I'd bring it to your attention. And they blew it up, and they didn't think it was a good idea at all.
But that, you said, got you started thinking about more things.
Yeah, definitely. Because it was one of the main reasons for me getting out was that, you know, they don't care about me, you know, and like they don't care about me, and that's horrible. And so I just wanted to get away from it, and I did. I started school, and then I thought more seriously about, you know, how politics itself impacts the general population
and the way that decision-making process works.
Yeah, and those rules and how the rules that they make really impact everyone, you know, down to, you know, medical attention, everything.
Education.
Yeah,
you know,
everything, you know.
Foreign policy, I mean, it's endless.
Name it, you know. So that's where it originates, like money, whether or not, you know, stoplights mean anything. Like, it all starts there.
Whether or not you're going to put a stop sign in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Which usually have to wait until there's a traffic accident and then someone says, oh, hey, let's put a stoplight here.
The reason for, I'd say 80% of the rules in the Navy are a result of someone dying. And I would always say, you know, if you could obviously see that something was dangerous, like fighting a fire without a shirt on, you know, like, that's dangerous. Like, that's blatantly dangerous. Like, anyone could see that. And it wasn't until they actually had to jettison planes and there was bombs going off and people died and were severely burned who probably wouldn't have been if they were properly clothed, like even a t-shirt.
It's the little things. So you... what were you studying when you went to FSCJ after your Navy, after your time in the Navy?
I was just trying to find out really what I wanted to do, like just where I wanted to be.
General studies.
Yeah, general studies. I took some communications classes, like public speaking and stuff like that, but I didn't know exactly what I was going to do.
And you had told me that you took 1 or 2 maybe production classes or broadcasting classes, and that actually led to something else, or led to an opportunity in media. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, funny story. I was working with a bunch of friends on building a marketing company, and I had taken broadcast journalism at JU, and I was they were working with NORML, National Organization for Marijuana Legalization. Yeah. And they sent me to a Slightly Stupid concert and asked me to go just take, you know, some shots of their booth and go, you know,
just get like B-roll and stuff.
Yeah, basically just make a nice little video. And I actually snuck backstage and was able to interview one of the band members for Slightly Stupid. Then I contacted him whenever it was time for me to do my internship, and he sent me up, and I got to go with them and like hang out in LA and do all their marketing
and you
stuff.
said you got an opportunity to meet a huge number of different acts. And
I worked with like pretty much everyone in the reggae scene. So it was like Dirty Heads,
Mm-hmm.
golly, now I can't even think of any. The Expendables,
Yeah.
Michael Fronte,
Okay.
a bunch of people, yeah. Actually, got to go on a cruise to go film these guys. Like,
Really?
yeah.
Was it like a bunch of different acts or just one act on the cruise?
It was a bunch of different acts.
Cool,
And
cool.
so,
How
yeah,
long was the cruise?
It was like 4 days.
Cool.
We were supposed to go to the Bahamas, but it didn't pan out.
Well, we're up against it for our first segment here on the State of Things, but we will be right back with Matt Killen. And we are back here on the State of Things with Matt Killen. Now, Matt, over the break, we were talking a little bit about our experiences in media and maybe how that's shaped some of the way we've been approaching things these last few years. Could you tell me a little bit more about your experience in media, maybe as it relates to politics or maybe just local involvement in branding?
Right. So the bulk of my experience came from school.
Mm-hmm.
Where I went to JU for communications, public relations, and public speaking. Dabbled in advertising. So that's where the bulk of my experience came from. But whenever we're talking about like local news or the overscope in media in general,
Mm-hmm.
I just have a lot of opinions on it and
Okay.
that sort of thing. More than a lot of hands-on experience with it. I've never worked in the mainstream media or at a news station or anything, but I write press releases and I pitch them all the time on different things and like what flies as far as media goes and helping with story shaping.
What has your experience been with helping to shape that story, or when working with some of these other media organs that you find yourself working with?
Well, I guess that the most recent example would be the incident in Hemming Park, and mind you, it's all pro bono. I don't charge for that.
Just for the audience, could you explain to them what happened in Hemming Park?
Right. So there was an altercation between some protesters from the Jacksonville Progressive Coalition,
and I believe they were protesting the strike in Syria,
right?
If I remember correctly.
Correct. And they were met by Gary Snow, who went on their stage and he was waving a flag around and getting in their face with obscene gestures and really getting close to them, invading their personal space and that sort of thing. And one of the protesters slapped his hand out of his face, and then a fight broke out, and the police
from there.
The police,
broke it up.
They broke it up, but they probably didn't have to break it up in the way that they did. So I'd say that they, over-aggressed slightly, but, there's a lot of things that we can all learn from that.
Well, and there's the whole, all's well that ends well, running with scissors, but no one got their eye poked out sort of thing.
Yeah. Some people were hurt, but I don't think anyone was permanently.
There was no serious lasting.
Yeah, no one died, so
no broken bones, hopefully.
No broken bones. Some torn muscles and stuff like that, which is painful, but...
How large was this scrum? Were there a lot of people involved in the protest? Or
there really wasn't. It wasn't that big of a protest.
It wasn't some big thing.
No, it was actually relatively small. Normally, these protests, you see hundreds of people.
Yeah, when you describe it and you hear protest, you think, hundreds of people waving banners and...
Yeah. And the Jacksonville Progressive Coalition pretty much stood alone on the political spectrum, opposing Syrian aggression towards Syria and what they're doing over there. But it was anyway. That's neither here nor there.
But you were involved in maybe getting their side of the story out.
Yeah,
and
because
that's kind of what
the first way that it broke out was that these protesters were just agitating the police and saying obscenities to the police, which they were, but it wasn't a violent act that they were committing. It was, in my opinion, it was more so self-defense and that sort of thing. So, especially with Gary Snow, who is a towering figure, like physically getting directly in your face, it's intimidating. And so, whenever, ironically, a Syrian missile strike protest breaks out into a fight, you you can't help but need to express like exactly what it was that happened. So.
Or just make sure there's a recording of events and everyone's side of the story is being told.
Yeah, and so in the following news coverage, I made sure that everyone was prepped and they didn't fall for any of the traps and stuff like that.
They knew what they were going to say. They weren't going to get baited into loaded question answers. That
Exactly.
Sort of, all the sort of tricks
reporters
are going to play.
And it's not even a trick. It's part of their investigative process. And I'm not trying to obstruct that. I'm trying to just help these.
Make sure they're accurately stating what they're trying to express, as opposed to expressing it in a way that could be colored in a certain way by the people telling the story.
Right, you're pretty good at this. You just did it for me. So yeah, that's the most recent one.
And you were also involved. Could you tell me a little bit more about your involvement with the burning operation during the 2016 election here in Jacksonville?
Yeah, I started it up, and then I had to step away for just about 2 months while I was working, and a lot of really
it was
great.
Such of a time. It was so time consuming, and you didn't have time.
It is completely life involving.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people don't understand. It's a task, and you're pretty much, you go to work 8 to 4, 9 to 5, and you get home and you have to go work harder than you've been working all day in order to make it happen, and you got to do it for free.
Yeah, well, for anyone who's been involved in a campaign out there, I'm sure they're all nodding their heads right now.
Yeah, they know that feeling, and that doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on.
Well, it's what is it, like the craziest 6 months of your life? Just it turns into an all-consuming day and night weekend.
Like, I already have a headache, but you're just like making it worse. All that work. Yeah, so it's it can be a lot of work. It can be very draining, but it's also very rewarding.
Absolutely. And I think it can be rewarding regardless of even the outcome of the election, just because of the networks you build with other people.
Friends, like the friends that I've made on campaigns, like, because you don't think that you can relate to anyone around you until you get on a campaign.
And you're sweating together.
And you're like, oh man, I know all these people. And yeah, you're sweating together. You're
putting signs in yards.
Putting signs in yards, doing community events.
Doors
knocking those doors. So yeah.
Knocking doors. I'm sure we got
Yeah. You have to do that. So yeah.
Man. You meet some interesting people knocking on doors, though.
You meet every color of the rainbow you meet on knocking doors.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, especially here in Jacksonville, where we got so many different kinds of folks. Now, more recently, have there been any local Democratic projects you've been involved with, or has it been more on maybe a community service level?
So, with the Democratic Party, what they're mainly working on is organizing people so they can win elections. That's their only goal, is focusing on candidates and making sure that those candidates have a really well configured toolkit to get out there and really
get the vote out.
Yeah, make a huge dent, and so that's the idea. But what I've been working more so with is, in conjunction with that, working with like the Women's March locally, Indivisible, and all these large groups like the Jacksonville Progressive Coalition, to get them all together so that we're able to have a real force behind what it is we're trying to accomplish, and using the DNC to be that roadmap.
I do have a question for you about that. What would you say the state of things are with some of these organizations that maybe aren't as tightly organized with one another to form maybe a single mass of energy? Because that seems to me what you're describing a little bit is, if we could only get everybody to work together to kind of row the boat in the same direction and use the power that we can all generate together.
Right. So all these different groups have their own way of doing things. I think it's kind of like writing an independent study, so the Women's March focuses on 8 different issues. The Indivisible group raises awareness for specific issues in a timely manner. So like the healthcare bill and things like that, they will instantly be reactive in staging protests for those things. The Jacksonville Progressive Coalition is similar in that way. they stand on top of issues as they happen to be timely and to make sure that that is being opposed or it is being modified in a way that fits that group's ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's fine that they do that. I think it's great. I think it's very important. And once we get candidates together, we all will have meetings to pick our candidate and do primaries and things like that with the public so that we know what's going to win. And then we will all stand behind them and do the legwork of canvassing and phone banking.
Which is really that's really where it gets done.
That's where it gets done. Everyone knows that.
Especially
but
you don't
need to be canvassing, for years before an election. You need to be like really hitting that hard in 6 months. In the prior time, you need to be branding and messaging and making sure that
have the contacts in the community,
and you're at least in the media as much as the other side. So
you have the name recognition.
Yeah, because we don't any longer have equal time laws. So if a Republican goes on TV and talks for 90 minutes.
What Matt's referring to there is we used to have, and I think it was from the FEC or the FCC, what were called equal time laws decades and decades ago, where if you had one side of an issue being presented on the news or on broadcast, you had to devote equal time to the other side of the issue, which is no longer the case. 24-hour news and
that actually went away in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So that's whenever we started seeing 24-hour news cycles and all that. And another thing, I want to point this out. Like, I love whenever, some people say like the liberal media, and they say that all the time. And I'm flabbergasted because I'd like to say, like Trump won as a result of billions of dollars in free advertising in the media.
It wasn't necessarily free advertising insofar as they were all making a truckload off his appearances, which was the whole problem, was the profit motive of the media companies.
Thank you. I completely 100% agree with that.
Which just goes to show you, even when you have someone on as far to the right as I am and on far to the left as he is, that we can still agree.
On a lot, actually. I think we probably agree on about 90% of the issues that are out there.
But the people that cover the news for us don't have any interest in covering that 90%.
Well, if you focus on that 10%, it's probably more interesting, because if 90% of people out there agree on something, then it's boring. It's an echo chamber. But whenever you hear about this 10%, you're like, oh, what is that? And that's what's the word I'm looking for?
It makes better TV.
More blood, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
And
it's the media's first worst bias towards conflict.
Yeah.
But I think
it goes into education. We don't have critical thinking and civics in education.
And I think that was something we were talking about, is the importance of how we've lost civics and an understanding of how our government works, how we pass laws, how representation actually works in the United States, that we're not technically a democracy, we're a democratic republic, all these important little facets that color the way our country works and the way its political and legislative processes work.
Yeah.
I think that's important. That's the kind of knowledge that anyone who's going to live here and vote.
Financial literacy.
Yeah, financial literacy. All the tools for navigating adult life that aren't necessarily given to us through our education system the way it's structured now.
Yeah.
Now, are you currently working with any issues facing Jacksonville? You were at a cleanup yesterday. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I live on Ashley Street, not to give too much of my information away, but
which is downtown Jacksonville.
Yeah. And so there's the what is that called? Downtown Vision, which takes care of the core of downtown. So that's Church Street to Bay Street, and I want to say Julia to Main Street.
Okay.
Right. So it's a big block, and it's really nice. It's actually very well taken care of. They're working on filling up abandoned buildings, getting permanent for building, and fire codes and things like that. But outside of that, it's not taken care of. and there's a big problem
So
with
you
that.
have kind of a nugget of niceness, and then
In the middle of, it's like a flower in a pot of dirt.
yeah,
And so the face of the city, like what everyone sees whenever they're driving down Matthews or Union, is garbage.
Yeah.
Like straight up garbage.
industrial hellscape.
Not even. It's garbage. It's garbage. It's abandoned buildings. It's nasty.
It's graffiti. It's the whole thing.
And all of that is just wrapped into one line. And if I was driving by that, I didn't know the city, or if I lived on the south side or on the beach, I would want to probably avoid that area. I would not drive down there out of curiosity.
It wouldn't leave a positive impression of the state of our downtown area.
Yeah, so we're going to try to keep cleaning that up. We're going to try to do it at least every Saturday.
Well, I think that just about does it for this segment, but I think we'll talk a little bit more about Jacksonville downtown development when we come back.
All right.
And we are back for our third segment of the State of Things, Episode 5 here today with Matt Killen. Now, when we went into the break, we were talking just a little bit about some of the efforts going on to keep downtown Jacksonville beautiful, but I'd like to maybe spend some time this segment just talking about citywide efforts to really refurbish and renovate that part of town, because I think that's going to be important for, like you said, really putting a fresh face on the downtown of Jacksonville, so that when people do come through, we're putting our best foot forward as a city.
Yeah, definitely. Very interesting. The JTA, Jacksonville Transportation Authority, is going to be redoing the Rosa Park station.
Really?
Yeah, so that's going to be that's like the nose job. It's gonna make it look a lot nicer. It's also going into the north side. They're going to extend the Skyway.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. The Downtown Investment Authority?
Yes, I've actually seen them speak at a couple of different World Affairs Council events, but I know they're heavily involved in the kind of nuts and bolts process of making sure the money gets where it needs to go.
Right, yeah. So they help people with all kinds of stuff. And I think that, they have a $750,000 budget.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see that doubled. Because
is that on a yearly basis?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think that might be their overall budget. I'm not sure. But I would just like to see that doubled so that they could get more accomplished as far as downtown.
Now, for people who don't know, the Downtown Investment Authority, could you tell folks a little bit about some of maybe the projects they've been involved with, or some of the things that have come to downtown?
So Ron Chamberlain's Book Mine, they're right now they're working with him to expand these apartments next door to his bookstore.
Which is
there on the square,
right next to the Modern Art
Park
Gallery.
Plaza. Yeah,
yeah, Mocha.
Yeah, Mocha. Yeah, sorry, wrong one. But yeah, so he's going to be putting some apartments in there. I really want to get one. And downstairs, he's going to have a little diner, for a little breakfast like diner kind
like
of place.
A little nook for everyone to come and
Yeah, and I think that's something that downtown's needed a lot.
Now, as you mentioned in the first segment, you live downtown. How long have you been living downtown?
About 3 years.
Okay, and what has your experience been? Because I know for a lot of people in the audience who are longtime Jacksonville natives, the joke always was that you don't want to go downtown, you don't want to get shot, this, that, or the other thing.
Yeah.
Jacksonville's dangerous, don't go downtown. But I actually find now that people who have been from the city or grew up here for years and years and years actually have a greater reticence to go downtown than people who've just moved here, who don't know the old bad reputation that it had, which has really changed a lot.
Yeah, I've seen it both ways. So like the violence downtown is not really on the map for me, as far as long as I've lived down there.
Mm-hmm.
There's been, I think, one shooting the whole time I've lived down there. And, the town center has actually had more shootings than downtown.
Really?
Yeah. So I would just, I would put that out there. But downtown's great. The problem that I have with downtown is after 6 o'clock, it's really hard to find a variety of things to eat.
I would imagine it quiets down, kind of.
It's dead. There's nothing going on down there unless Jazz Fest or something like that, which
or unless
is great.
it's like a weekend and there's like a band playing at a bar. Just
like,
kind of.
Even then, it's only for that small area, and
or that part of time that they're there doing something.
It's a certifiable food desert. So, because there's only one grocery store, they can basically set their price at whatever they want because they're the only competition within the area.
Unless you want to come over to Riverside, I guess, and go to the worst Publix parking lot you've ever been in.
That's the other thing, is it is just as complicated to park there and then come back with all your groceries and walk 4 blocks with your groceries. You might as well walk there.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. The whole parking situation, getting your groceries out of your car back to your place.
I'm working with another company, Go Kart Express, that's going to go around to different apartments, take grocery orders, because this is becoming
It's like a food Uber?
Yeah. Fuber.
Yeah, there we go.
I need to write that down.
Well, that actually sounds like a pretty good idea, though. I mean, especially for people where logistically getting groceries can be a real pain.
It started out of tailgates. So they deliver to tailgates, and that saves people who are at these things tons of time because they can't go, and it keeps people full and things like that. So
gotta balance out the alcohol they're consuming at the tailgate.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it. You did. Keeps people paced. So it's a good idea.
You gotta create a sponge there to kind of soak it all up.
Yeah, definitely.
Because if there's anything people in Jacksonville like, it is drinking and tailgating. And football,
especially Florida, Georgia, the world's largest cocktail party.
Yes. Yeah. Although I think they're trying to get us to stop calling it that, which we never will.
Too bad.
Yeah, because that's what it is. And
what are you trying to do? You're trying to get rid of our world record here?
But do you have any other maybe observations about your day-to-day, just what it's like to be downtown? Because I hear from a lot of people that really want to make downtown great, and that there are some reasons in the past in civic development in Jacksonville of why that might not be the case. I heard years ago they were debating about putting UNF downtown, which I thought would have been a fabulous idea, because then you would have all these young people living there, and they would be able to support all the kind of businesses we're talking about wanting to have downtown now.
Right.
But we don't have enough people living downtown to support some of those businesses. It's kind of like a chicken and the egg thing.
It is exactly a chicken and the egg thing. We need to take a chance. We took a chance on Town Center. It worked. It's sustaining itself.
It's also sucking all the energy.
Well, I wouldn't even say sucking all the energy. I would say that there is no conductor here.
Yeah.
So we need to create the conductor.
And one besides Jazz Fest or a Jaguars game.
Because honestly, it's not sustainable. It will never be systemic, because it's like a once a week, once a year.
Well, downtown needs to be a place you go on your off day for fun. Yeah. We have an afternoon, let's all go downtown tonight and get some dinner and walk to a bar or see a show or.
We could basically make downtown just a multiple of all the best cities in the United States, or around the world for that matter. It doesn't matter.
Well, and if you think about the beautiful natural,
we have a river right there.
We have one of those.
We have
beautiful...
all this water. We have lots of people who really want this to happen. We have tons of history downtown. And I think that it really has a lot to offer. I think that Jacksonville it's primed to be the best city in America.
I think I'm actually right there with you, and I think that's actually reflected in some of the demographic growth we've seen in Jacksonville. Jacksonville is actually one of the faster growing cities in the United States right now.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot through a lot of the Sun Belt cities like Austin, Texas, or maybe like Phoenix, Arizona. Some of these maybe not huge metropolis areas, but are still large enough to attract some of that business development, like a Jacksonville. And Jacksonville actually has other things going for it too. We have our great truck shipping system. We have I-95 and I-10, with which 95 runs through, and I-10 starts here and goes all the way to California. Mm-hmm. We have a huge rail hub with a CSX headquarters here, and we also have the port.
Mm-hmm. I think there's just a couple things that we're lacking, and it's not much. It's Well, it is much, but
yeah.
like public transportation, JTA is doing great, but we need to
And with a city
get
this
as much
big,
money to them as we possibly can. Yeah.
Well, and with a city this big, that's just a tough nut to crack. You know, it's not a, you know, you can drive from one side of Jacksonville to the other, and it might end up taking you an hour and a half if the traffic's bad.
Yeah. So just like downtown, there's the north side, the west side, even a lot of parts of the south side that are completely removed from jobs. There's just not jobs there. Their unemployment rate is through the roof. So it's a matter of being able to get to where the jobs are, and also working on building those communities so that they can be sustainable by themselves. You know, when we talk about big government being a problem, big business can be a problem in the same way, because if you have, this factory over here is the one that employs every person in town, then first off, no one really has a lot of options, but B, they have to get there. And if they're not living near there, it can be difficult to get there, especially if it's not a high-paying job.
Well, and it's not, it goes back to the size of Jacksonville and the difficulty of getting to different sides of Jacksonville. And I totally understand that can be a huge hassle compared to other parts of the country where, you might have a subway or bus.
Yeah, like in New York, they cover the same amount of territory, if not way more, but they're all broken up into little cities. It goes back to consolidation of Jacksonville.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a different situation here, because the amount of investment that it would take to get an equal level of service, I think, would be greater on maybe like a per mile covered basis, because we're not going to have as much traffic in as small of an area.
Well, exactly. So like I said, though, it goes back to consolidation. So like when we consolidated the city
in 1968.
We created, I wonder why. But we created
we were trying to get the tax base back within the city, because a lot of people had moved out of the core tax base, so they didn't have money funding maybe the police department or the fire department that they needed. So they expanded it to have the city of Jacksonville take up the entire Duval County, so they would repatriate all that money back into city government.
So I've heard different stories.
Yeah,
so it's ironic that would happen right as civil rights happened. Well, the downtown core was no longer under the protection of Jim Crow, so black people could move in, and they did. And white people moved out and wanted to remain in control of the city, so they consolidated the city and created one of the biggest city councils in the United States with 19 city council members. I think the reason that we see the west side, the north side, parts of the south side, and little spots all over Jacksonville is because the constituents can't be directly represented by one city council member, whenever that would normally take a city council and a mayor to properly govern that area, that size of an area.
Yeah. Well, and that speaks to the kind of different cities of Jacksonville theory, where
there is different cities
where
they're different places.
Well, you have a geographic area large enough, and also a population area large enough that in traditional circumstances in other parts of the country, this would be its own city.
It would
mayor,
be its own
with city council,
with everything,
with all the other. They could speak to their local issues, and I definitely think that you were probably onto something where, as a city grows in both geographic size and population size, it becomes increasingly difficult to be as responsive to each individual constituent and their needs as the greater group that representation is serving grows.
Right.
Where it's
it goes against the conservative argument of big government. You know what I mean? So or it goes with it, actually. So you would want a limited government.
It goes back to almost federalism, which is the government that is most local will generally govern best. Why would I?
All politics is local.
Yeah. I would prefer my laws to be written by my city council or my state Congress when possible, as opposed to the federal government.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have a better understanding of my needs, being more local to me.
Yeah, I know them. Go talk to them directly and make changes quickly and further this brilliant experiment. So,
well, I do think. I know we'll get on our soapbox a little bit about the issues we'll see with Jacksonville from time to time. Sure. But I really want to take it back to that I am fundamentally optimistic about both the business, political, demographic and just the prospects of Jacksonville in
Yeah,
general over the next several
decades. It just needs tweaking. Like it's a really great engine. It just needs, maybe an O-ring or two.
Well, and it's so inexpensive to live here. We have a reasonable tax structure. There's just a lot of incentives for people to come here and be able to maybe build a foundation on which to build their own success.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's a very exciting time to be a young person living here and seeing some of these changes.
Yeah, definitely. Especially for entrepreneurs and people who just want to, kind of adjust the experiment. Just
trying to get something off the ground here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, I think this about wraps up our third segment on downtown development, but I'm CK Slater, and we are here with the State of Things, Episode 5, and Matt Killen is joining me, but we will be... Hello, and we are back for our final segment of the State of Things with CK Slater. I'm joined here by Matt Killen, and for our final segment, and I hate to spring this on you, though, I just like to ask what your experience was going through the whole 2016 process, because I know that everyone who I'm going to ask about this is going to bring their own perspective to the description of, what their experience the last 18 months were, but I'd just love to hear, your side of the story.
I mean, what a roller coaster, honestly. I was a delegate for Bernie.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start at the beginning. What was, the beginning? Let's say it's like spring of 2015. Everything's starting.
Oh God, what's the matter with you? You trying to make me cry or something?
No, I know. He's like, I don't want to imagine back when hope was possible.
Yeah. So, I was watching Bernie from like 2014, just on Facebook,
some like video
social
clips
media.
and stuff.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, this guy is spot on. Like, he is just spot on. These banks are too big to fail. That's what. Yeah, exactly.
His message spoke
all
to
the
you.
fraud, like it's fraud. I've seen it. Like, I have friends who work on Wall Street, and they all expressed, not a distaste because they're getting money, but they're like, yeah, and all you got to do is this, this, and this, and I'm like, oh my God, I see terrible things.
Well, it's like finally getting to see behind the curtain.
Yeah, exactly. And so a lot of what Bernie said just really spoke to me as honest, as genuine.
Well, I definitely think that was his greatest weapon against Hillary, was certainly his authenticity.
Yeah,
because that attacked her right where she was weakest.
I mean, I think that I wouldn't even put that all on Hillary. Like, I would put that on politics in general. So
just the nature of the game.
The nature of the game. He changed the game. He really did. Bernie came along, and he was a person of honesty and integrity. So was Obama, but a lot of people didn't see him that way, and nobody could deny that Bernie had integrity, because you could go back 30 years and look at footage. He's been saying the exact same thing. So I just thought that he was genuine, that he really cared about his plan, and the way he chose to run was who I thought would.
I feel like maybe there were some tactical errors that were made. Like, I think there were some opportunities maybe to score points against Hillary that he didn't necessarily take advantage of sometimes.
Yeah.
Which
I think he waited out.
Yeah.
Because he saw himself, honestly, again, as a independent democratic socialist from one of the smallest states in the union. So he didn't see, no one knew who he was either. That was the funny thing. Is like,
it was one of those where I think it almost surprised him a little bit.
I think, yeah. And one of his first rallies had like 14 people at it, and then turned into like 14,000 to 20,000.
And then you see an article in Politico where someone's painted his hair onto the side of their house.
Yeah. Yeah. It got crazy for a while there. I thought about painting his face on Chamberlain's building. I didn't ask, but I thought about it quite a bit.
I'm sure he'd be okay with it.
He would have been fine with it. Yeah, he's probably
as long as it was a good rendition.
He'll probably be upset that I didn't pitch it to him now, but we were so busy. I was like, we have to knock doors. We can't be painting.
Yeah. We got to shake hands and kiss babies.
Yeah, and so from there, after the primary, which wasn't disappointing in Florida because it's Florida and we got 38% of the vote, that's crazy to me. I thought that was a good sign, and me and some friends.
I mean, they made a race of it. It was all the way down to the end.
Yeah, definitely.
And Hillary had all the kind of Clinton machine advantages of being Hillary
every bit
Clinton.
of it, and on top of that, Bernie was a invader, if you will, of the Democratic Party. Now, he did caucus with the Democrats, and he has for 30 years, but he wasn't a Democrat. He wasn't falling in line for anyone. He never had. And so it was, I think, a tactic not to go out there and destroy any opponent, much less the probable Democratic nominee. Like, just because of the machine.
Don't speak ill of other people in the party sort of thing.
Yeah, that's just a code that you follow, with any group. You go around talking bad about your boss because...
Well, I definitely think there was a calculation there for him, which maybe would have, if he could go back and do it again, I'd be curious if he did everything the same way, because I don't think he realized how good his chances were.
I think he would have been much more aggressive in obtaining delegates.
Yeah, if he knew it was his chance and he understood maybe the nature of the whole super delegate thing and the way that would,
Well, he did understand that, and in the past...
He just couldn't do anything about it.
Well, there's like 25 states, I think, where super delegates can do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
In most states, they have
What do they call those? Unbound delegates, I think is what they call that, where they can make their own.
Yeah, exactly. So the other delegates are able to change their mind, but they didn't. Or they're supposed to vote with the population on how that went, but some just didn't. So there was a lot of conflict there. The same thing was tried in 2008, but Obama really fought hard for his delegates and was able to get a lot more delegates and then clinch the nomination that way. So I think that's where a lot of it really went down. I actually made a list of superdelegates that got shared like thousands of times, and it was because people wanted to phone bank delegates. I got a call from the campaign headquarters asking me to stop doing that.
Really?
And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not stopping this. We are calling these people because they're the decision makers. And yeah, so people from what is it called? Online media, the online media crew. I can't remember their name. They have a specific title, but they called me and asked me to stop, and I told them no.
Well, so you got involved early on, and I remember even going to one of your events. I think, what was it, 1904 or
the debate?
Yeah, the debates. What was it like? Have you maintained maybe some of the relationships you built with people from your involvement with Bernie? Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
I think that's half the reason that Hillary got so close here was because the people that were working in the grassroots Bernie campaign were, they were very... In Florida, it's different than it is in a lot of parts of the country. I'll say that first, because it's right-leaning, So if Hillary,
for a state this size, is a little Texas,
and
too,
Hillary's a centrist. So if you're all the way on the left, you're probably not going to get a whole lot done. So unless you just are really inspiring, and so these folks that were on the Bernie campaign went right to the Hillary campaign and started canvassing and working hard. We got within 5,000 votes.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's never happened.
Do you know what what was the total voting?
I can't recall,
but you were within 5,000.
Yeah, Hillary was. Yeah.
Oh, okay. For a city as big as Jacksonville, that's
it's pretty crazy. So they were really happy about that. I didn't work on it. I was on a documentary, going around the country interviewing delegates on, why they aren't or why they are supporting the candidate. So it was kind of...
And that was maybe the
fact-finding, really.
The last thing I wanted to speak about with you before we wrap up for the day is tell me a little bit more about traveling across the country filming the documentary.
So it was crazy. It was kind of like herding cats, but we just watched this stupid commercial about herding cats. It was really funny, but it was a lot like that. You're chasing down subjects all over the country and trying to trying to see what they're doing, where they are, like how they get involved, and the different nuances that come with where they live, and how that could be applicable to.
And what was going into it? What was the artistic aim of the documentary? What was the story you guys were trying to tell?
We really weren't trying to tell a story. We were trying to find the story. So,
well, I guess it's a documentary. So
yeah. We knew that,
but, I mean, what was
it didn't go well at the convention. Like, we were all there at the convention.
Well, just to explain for the people out there, they were filming delegates.
Yeah, we were interviewing mainly delegates, but also Democrats and progressives and Green Party people. Some Republicans, but they weren't too open to
I can imagine.
Yeah, you don't know anybody, and you don't have time to really get to know them. So I'd be skeptical as well. But it was very interesting. And
how many states did you end up going to?
30.
Okay.
30 states. We interviewed around 135 people or so.
And how long did this take, going all over the place?
Gosh, I haven't thought about that. It was, I think, August to November.
Now, out of all the responses you got from some of these interviews, did you notice maybe a theme among what people were telling you, what were your conclusions from what they told you?
I would say 80% of the people who were delegates for Bernie, that means that they volunteered, that means that they built grassroots organizations, and they did a whole lot of work, were absolutely in no way going to help the Hillary campaign. In fact, they were going to go against it. So in the majority of those places, it was a 50-50 race. It's amazing she got as many votes as she did. Because of that, you're losing at least 30% of your voting base right off the bat. And I think it could have been done a lot. I think the transition could have been a lot smoother from Bernie being their hero to Hillary being their hero.
Or making sure that everything was kind of coherent, going from a two-person primary to, okay, we need to worry about the Republicans now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that people in the Democratic Party and on the left tend to be very passionate people about their candidate and what they would like to see as far as issues.
You fall in love, you don't fall in line.
Exactly. And so it's a breakup. It is the worst breakup. And
well,
there was nothing there. There's a lot of things that the DNC could have done to make
reach out to you guys,
the Bernie delegates, feel better.
Well, and you saw how even the convention went. There was some tension there between.
There was a lot of tension.
Yeah.
So yeah. I would have done differently. I would have the Bernie delegates are notoriously they're talking about income inequality. That would tend you to believe that they probably don't have a whole ton of money to go spend at a hotel in Philadelphia and travel and food and all of those things. The DNC could have easily helped them out with that and helped out the Hillary people for that matter, because it is expensive.
The Hillary people were bending the DNC's ear, saying making it as hard for them to show a strong presence as possible.
Yeah,
I mean, and I don't want to speculate about...
I wouldn't speculate on it. It's true. And a lot of those things were true. And I think that it was a part of the way that the campaigns were ran. The ideas are right. The platform is correct. The plan in order to get people on your side. Yeah. The execution of getting the Bernie delegates onto your side was abysmal. And whoever was in charge of that should be fired.
Absolutely.
Because it's just not the way you do things. And yeah.
There was a part of me that expected those tensions to continue, but there was another part of me that was frankly kind of surprised that, especially after it became clear that it was Trump, that I would expect that fact to have galvanized.
I'm so shocked that it didn't, but a lot of people were in this
rock and a hard place kind of thing.
Oh man, I can't remember the name of it. But it's Bernie or bust.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of that. I can't believe that. But
so we were talking a little bit about the folks who were Bernie or bust.
Yeah. Before the camera jumped out there for a second, we were talking about that, but the DNC could have done a lot more work to make sure that the Bernie or bust, especially the Bernie or bust people, felt
Like-
needed. In a lot of ways, I don't think that they felt needed.
Felt like the rest of the party wanted them on the train.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot they could have done. They could have helped them get to Philly. We could have picked a different venue that wouldn't have been so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't done that long before the primaries ended, so it wasn't exactly like a long planned process. So they could have done a lot more to do that.
Well, it will be really exciting to see how you guys take that momentum moving forward in the way, I guess, politics will develop here in the next couple of years. But I'd really like to thank you so much for coming in and joining me here today. This has been the 5th episode of The State of Things. I am C.K. Slater, and this has been Matt Killen. I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us, and if you enjoyed the content, like and subscribe below.